and you can't fly under the rim. Yet when you go to those bad places, suddenly a white plane flies over under the rim, black helicopters show up. I showed on my episode. I show the
Yes.
black helicopters showing
Yes.
up. Like they do show
Yeah. Like they are protecting something.
something.
It's not as simple as this is a dangerous area, because you can go to any dangerous area.
You go just to the normal tourist area. It's
Right.
like, be careful. People
Right.
fall. 2 people a year fall.
Yeah, someone fell recently.
They
yeah,
did?
Yeah, an influencer. Of course, taking
Of
a
course.
selfie. But the Grand Canyon, there's been these crazy stories of people finding these like Egyptian, these caverns with like Egyptian artwork and hieroglyphics and these stories of artifacts that have been removed from there.
So the story is, it shows up, I believe, in like the Phoenix Gazette. It's 1903 or so. And the explorer is G.E. Kincaid, and he's going down. He's looking for gold deposits or whatever. This is just before Teddy Roosevelt made the Grand Canyon a preserve. He was a naturalist, so he finds these steps that are clearly man-made. He follows the steps up, and there's a cave, and he goes in there, and he describes hieroglyphics that look Egyptian but are not quite. He finds a statue that he describes as like Buddha-like, not Egyptian, not human, but sort of like Buddha, and all these weapons, shields, gold, all sorts of stuff. He keeps going. He finds a deserted city in the caves, and all these tunnels and caverns go everywhere, and he's trying to map everything. He comes out, and he goes back to town, and he gathers together a group that we're going to go find the stuff again. And people are excited about it. And a couple of weeks go by, and everyone's gathered to go on the expedition. He never shows. The expedition goes nowhere, and that's really the last we've heard of it.
Well, and is there any photographs or anything? No.
There never is of this stuff.
Right, just descriptions.
Just a great story.
Well, the great part of the story is the fact that you actually can't go there. And the idea that there's an area where the military is protecting people from being foolish, that doesn't make any sense.
Nobody asks why.
Right.
Like, nobody asks why. It really bothers me about that story and all of these, whether it's disclosure or whatever. I don't hear anyone asking why. Well, they won't let us. Well, who's they?
Right.
Someone's in charge of stuff that's not the president
Right.
or Congress. So who is it? So,
Is it possible there's some sort of a government installation down there somewhere?
It's all going to be woo-woo conspiracy stuff, or it's real, or G.E. Kincaid found something and someone got to him.
But if G.E. Kincaid found something, why would they want to hide some ancient civilization discovery, particularly in the early 1900s? Like, why? For what reason?
I don't know why Graham Hancock is marginalized now.
Right, but that wouldn't you think that there's like less of a grip on that stuff in the 1900s, the
Yes.
early 1900s?
I would think so.
Yeah.
So my guess would be treasure and money. That would be my guess. Is it shows up in the paper, the government goes down there like, there's a lot of stuff down here. Let's grab it, send it to the Smithsonian, who keeps 99% of the stuff under wraps. They have a billion items that nobody can see, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah, but what the fuck? Which I would love to know the official reason. See if you can Google. Is there an official reason why you're not allowed to go to certain areas of the Grand Canyon?
They use a VPN there, brother.
The story, I was looking at an article about the original article, and it says that the 2 guys mentioned might not have even existed.
Right.
There's no evidence of them.
G.E. Kincaid?
And
Right.
another guy named S.A. Jordan.
Oh, so it might be just a story that someone printed? Some horseshit?
When I was looking into one of these things before, I found something explaining that back in the early 1900s, when newspapers were a really popular thing to read, I don't know if it was like a game or if there was actual prizes people would play or like amongst themselves to try to get fake stories printed. If you could get the craziest story printed, you win like $500 or.
I might be wrong, but I think Jordan was connected to the Smithsonian, at least according to the story.
I pulled this from the Smithsonian Debunk, which, I mean, obviously they would if this is the way we're going to go with it, but them debunking this, and they gave 2 links, one to the original 1909 article and one to a 2008 update, and that's where I was pulling that from.
I don't trust the Smithsonian. They're exempt from all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, like there's a law passed not too long ago that if you have Native American artifacts that are important to that culture, especially burial artifacts, they must be returned. Unless you're the Smithsonian, then
They're allowed to hold on to
then
them?
you can make a case that you don't have to give it back.
How do they have so much power?
It's a government agency.
Smithsonian is a government. Oh, well, I didn't even know. I thought it was a private agency. So there's no official story as to why this area of the Grand Canyon is off limits.
For your safety,
The
is all
forbidden zone, they call it.
Yeah, that's all I can find.
That's
I'm looking
fucking
into
weird.
that.
That's fucking weird. That this story comes from the very area that's forbidden. That's fucking weird.
I think
What are the odds?
I
you know?
don't believe in coincidences, so a lot of these stories come from places you just can't go
Has anybody tried to hike in?
all the time,
wear
or
camo?
raft in
Yeah, did they get busted?
and busted, yeah, and arrested.
Really?
You could find
Fuck,
you could
man.
find online. I wish I knew the names of a team that went up there. That's who found the black helicopters, and I used them in the video, and I credit them. So you can find their videos. They're up there for an hour, hour and a half, trying to find stuff. And what they found up in that forbidden zone is anchored into the ground a giant hook,
Right.
or like a loop.
Yeah.
Like,
I
what
saw
would
that.
you use that for? And that would be to rappel down. That's the only reason that would be there. There's no explanation for what is this. They also found artifacts from that era, from the early 1900s, artifacts that people were there. So it's possible that they rappelled that, like they might have been standing right above that entrance. And there are reverse angles of that rock face that look a little weird. It could be pareidolia, but
What's pareidolia?
pareidolia is the mind's ability to see objects in random noise. You know, it's something we evolved to, to see predators in the forest. That's why if you see a cloud that looks like a Abraham Lincoln,
Right.
it's not Abraham Lincoln. It's pareidolia. But debunkers will always fall on pareidolia. So like the real believers, they hate that word.
God, that would be. Imagine. Everything would have to be rewritten. If they found some evidence of a lost civilization with no connection to any known civilization that was advanced, that was living in the Grand Canyon.
Did you ever think about going
To the Grand Canyon?
to go and just be an outlaw and go see?
How would you get in, though? I mean, if they have black helicopters and they're scanning the sky or scanning the ground with some sort of a drone or a plane, how many of these crashed crafts do you estimate there are that human beings have recovered?
More than 10.
More than 10.
More than 10.
How many of them are in possession of people in the United States?
I meant more than 10 in possession of the United States.
What about worldwide?
Worldwide,
Do we have any data on that?
we have data, but it's classified. There's no way to really talk about it.
But so there's more, though. You could safely say it's not just the ones in the United States.
not just the ones in the United States, and these.
Are they equally distributed?
I actually I don't know for sure in terms of data. I mean, we have our best data, of course, on our own retrievals.
But more
It's
than
hard to
10
say.
retrieved in the United States.
More than 10 retrievals.
What is your take
yeah.
on Bob Lazar?
Well, we looked into the Bob Lazar story, and but only from a certain relatively superficial level. Looked at we found out what his clearance levels supposedly were, and so on, which came back saying it was not high enough to be doing what he says he was doing. On the other hand, it may just simply be, it was better than that, but we didn't have the access to see that. So when I hear his physics descriptions, it's a puzzle. It seems not exactly as I would anticipate might be the technology behind the craft, but I can't absolutely write them off. So it's an enigma, and I don't have any hard data to prove one way or the other. So it's I know you've talked to him. And,
Yeah. It's a fascinating puzzle.
It is a fascinating puzzle.
Because that would be the place, S4 would be the place where they would do that kind of work. I mean, if you wanted to do something like that in complete privacy and secrecy, you'd do it in the middle of the Nevada desert, very protected,
That's true. Right.
outside of Area 51.
So even when people that have high clearances go and say, "Well, tell me about this. What's behind this?" who knows if it's a special access program, an SAP, it might be say, no, we're going to tell you that he didn't do anything of significance here. In fact, he might have done something of significance. There's just no way
Right.
of telling from the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the actual generator, the thing that powers the craft that Lazar talked about, what was your take on that? This idea that it was element 115, that when it encounters high radiation, it has some sort of an anti-gravitational effect, some warp effect.
Well, there are two aspects. One is, what is the material or mechanisms that generate the effects? And then the other is, are the effects being described reasonable descriptions of the kind of effects you think are associated with such craft? On the element 115, as you know, in the general scientific community, we've seen element 115, but it's very short-lived. So it's hard to evaluate that, and at this point, there's no evidence that's it. But his description of the anti-gravity effects and so on, that's an area that is well described as what you might expect. As it turns out, in that series of 38 papers, one of my own papers that I provided was one called Space-Time Metric Engineering. And when the pilots came to me and said, drops down, takes off, right angle turn at Mach 10, this is way beyond our physics. And I said earlier, no, I think it's not beyond our physics, beyond our engineering. But what I did on the physics level was all of our electronics that we have here, for example, this microphone, the recording that you're making, and so on, that's all based on electromagnetic kinds of technologies, all of which come out of Maxwell's equations. Maxwell's equations, Clerk Maxwell way back in the 1800s, developed the equations for electromagnetism, and basically any kind of electromagnetic device, you name it, Wi-Fi, whatever, can be traced back to his equations. So what I said to myself was, okay, we have these apparent craft operating with this unbelievable kinds of activity. Is there any way to account for that in our physics? Well, it turns out. So what I did, I took a sheet of paper, and the left-hand side of the paper, I wrote down all the weird effects that have been claimed. Right angle turn at Mach 10. I got close to the craft, and suddenly it wasn't the same size as it seemed to be when I was further away. It was a certain color, but when I got close to it, it was a different color. All these weird things. To me, the weirder the better, because if somebody was just making up a BS story, they want it to sound rational. So you don't come up with things like, well, I got in the craft, 5 minutes went by, I came out, and 2 hours had gone by. I mean, you're just not going to make that up. Then on the right-hand side of the piece of paper, I said, okay, we have Einstein's equations in general relativity, and we use them to talk about black hole mergers or neutron star mergers or whatever. And all these things are massively energetic events. Suppose I could engineer Einstein's equations the way we engineer Maxwell's equations for electromagnetic effects. What would I expect to see? And I find out I got a hand-in-glove match between what was claiming to be observed and, what Einstein's equation, if you could engineer them. Well, why can't we engineer them? Well, what we know today is the energy density required to engineer those equations is just way beyond our ability to do so. So,
Can you give me a comparison to what the energy requirements or something like that would be like?
yeah, people have in fact Alcubierre warp drive. I don't know if you've heard of that, but a Miguel Alcubierre was a researcher in general relativity and kind of a Star Trek fan and so on. And he said, I wonder if we could really have warp drive. And so he used Einstein's equations to say, okay, under what conditions could we do a warp drive? And he actually came up with solutions from out of the equations. Okay, what would it take to drive that? Oh, it would be hundreds of times more than the energy of the sun. I mean, just out of sight energy. So, until we have a new energy source, or until there's some back door that we haven't, zeroed in on, it's just really outside of our expertise.
Right.
What's up?
The thing I found about the Egyptians in Ohio was actually from a paper that was written. It's postulating it. I guess they took a lot of the evidence that they had been finding and saying this shows that there might have actually been Egyptians there.
What's from 1937?
That's when the guy was, I think, born. This is 40 years ago.
Oh,
so
wow.
that amulet was brass, apparently, and it was found near Cincinnati. And where I actually think that it might have been trade routes, because there was some stones that have been found in various parts of the world that are from specifically Ohio, because it's like a rainbow shale that was used in like arrowheads and stuff a long, long time ago. That area was used to make weapons like the first, like 12,000 years ago when the first people were kind of in North America. But that area in Ohio also is known as the sandstone capital of the world, and I don't know if that's related to the Egyptians, because that's what the pyramids are made out of.
We've seen
There's tons of sandstone that is very specific to that region.
Very short-lived. So it's hard to
Pyramids made
evaluate
out of
that.
sandstone?
I thought so.
And at this point,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
there's
evidence
21
that's it.
From
But
1800
his
to
description of the
1980,
anti-gravity
21
effects and
times
so
the
on,
amount of sandstone that
that's
made
an
the Great
area
Pyramid
that
was
is
shipped
well
out of Ohio
described
to make various
as-
buildings all over the world.
As what you might
Most of them in the
expect.
United States, obviously,
As
but
it
all
turns
over the
out, in that
place.
series of
Dun,
38
dun,
papers,
dun.
Yeah, just weird
This-
facts I
one
found
of
after
my
Graham
history
came
History
through.
of the humans.
We don't
that I
know
provided
history.
was one called
We know some,
Space-Time
right?
The only history that we
And
know
when
is
the
the one
pilots
we go
came to me
discover
and
on our
said,
own time. The one
you
that's
know,
presented
drops
to us is
down,
not
takes
history.
off,
It's
right?
all lies.
Angle turn at Mach 10.
Well, it's not all lies.
All of it.
There's
You know,
some
this
lies.
is
Found that
way
too.
beyond our
Lost
physics.
civilization in Grand Canyon
And I said
was,
earlier,
wait, Egyption?
You know, I
Yeah, the
think it's
Smithsonian
not
published
beyond
some
our
stuff in
physics,
1909,
beyond our
I
engineering.
guess, that where all this
But
came
what I
from.
did
There
on
was
the
an
physics
article that got
level was
written.
all of our electronics
and
that we have
I
here.
don't
For example,
know how much of it they
this
proved or
microphone,
was proven, or was
the
just
recording,
newspaper.
that you're making. And
Well,
so that's
clickbait
all
back in the
based
day,
on
Look at this.
kind of
Even
a-
more amazing, the
magnetic
artifact didn't match up to anything
All of
on
which
the
come
known
out of
record,
Maxwell's
rather
equations.
than appearing to be of
Maxwell's
Native American
equations clerk
origin,
Maxwell,
as one might
way back
expect.
in
The
the
object had
1800s,
distinct
developed the
Egyptian
equations for
or Tibetan
electromagnetism.
designs.
And basically,
Could there have
any
been an
kind of
entire civilization of
electromagnetic
Egyptians
device, you
living
name it,
here? If so,
Wi-Fi,
how did they get here?
Whatever
Dun,
can be
dun,
traced back to this
dun.
equation.
That hard.
So what
Hop
I
in the
said to
boat,
myself
man.
was,
You got cats
okay,
that
we
leave
have these
Africa and
apparent
try to come to
craft
Spain on
operating
these
with this
places
unbelievable
on
kinds of activity.
chicken wing.
Is there any way to account for that
Yeah.
in our physics?
It
Well,
is
it turns
interesting,
out.
right? Like
So
the
what I did,
population
I
of
took a
Cuba.
sheet of
Cuba's
paper,
so
and the
insanely
left-hand
diverse,
side
and
of
it's
the
right
paper,
there.
I wrote
Like,
down
what
all
is
the
the
weird
history of
effects
that,
that have
other
been
than the
claimed.
slave routes? Like,
You know,
what is the
right
history of
angle
Cuba?
turn
Because
at
Cuba
Mach
is
10,
very distinct
I got
African
close to
people
the
living
craft,
there.
and suddenly it
The
wasn't
whole
the same
Caribbean,
size as
all
it
that
seemed to be
whole
when I was
area
further away.
Is has a lot of African roots
It was a
to
certain
but it's just a place
color,
that was
but
conquered
when
by
I
the
got
Spain,
close to it,
you
it
know,
was
by the
it
Cortezes.
was a different color.
You know, those type of people.
You know, all these weird things to me are.
What
to
really
me, the
disturbs
weirder
me
the
is there's
better.
no way to know
Because if
exactly
somebody
what
was
happened.
just making up a
It's like
BS
you're
story,
piecing things
they
together
want it to
based on
sound rational.
artifacts
So
and
you don't come up
historical
with things
record,
like,
things that
well, I
people
got
wrote
in the
down,
craft,
and
5
journals
minutes
and
went by,
logs. And
I came out,
Well,
and 2 hours had
there's
gone
people
by.
that have
I mean,
traveled.
you're just
so
not going to make
again,
that
I've
up
studied this
then.
so long ago,
On
but
the
I
right-hand side of
remember
the piece of paper, I
reading
said,
primary
okay,
source
we
from
have
somebody
Einstein's
that traveled
equations
with
of general
Cristobal Colon,
relativity,
aka Christopher
and we use them to
Columbus.
talk about black hole
And
mergers
he was
or
saying
neutron
very
star
specific
mergers
things about
or
his
whatever.
accounts when he reached these different
and
places.
all these things are massively
You know, and he was
energetic
saying
events.
things like, "We got to the land and we found
Suppose
Africans."
I could engineer Einstein's
And
equations.
I remember him
the way we
specifically saying,
engineer Maxwell's equations.
so no matter
for
where we go, we find
electromagnetic effect.
Africans. And he
What
said
would
it
I
as if he was
expect to see?
disappointed. And
And I
then they
find
started
out
talking
I got
about
a
like,
hand-in-glove match
this is.
between
They
what
started
was
talking
claiming
about
to
their
be
culture and
observed.
describing their
And
culture.
you know what Einstein's
You just got
equations?
to go look at
If
the
you could
people that
engineer them
travel
well,
with
why
Cristobal
can't we engineer
Colon,
them well?
and there's
what
some
we at
firsthand
least,
accounts
what we know
there,
today
and they're very
is the
honest
energy
about
density
it. You know?
required to engineer those
Dude, I'm
equations
gonna look into that now.
is just
That's
way
very
beyond
interesting.
our
I'm gonna ask
ability
Graham
to do
about
so.
that too.
So
What he
can you
knows
give
about
me a
it.
comparison
Yeah.
to what the
He's
energy
studied,
requirements of something like
especially
that would be
on
like?
his latest book.
Yeah,
he studied a lot
people
about
have in fact
the
Alcubierre
various
warp drive.
cultures that
I
made
don't
it
know
to
if you've
North
heard of
America
that,
and South
but
America.
Miguel Alcubierre
Okay. Yeah. It's
was a
just
researcher
very rich in
in
history.
general
Very,
relativity
very rich in history.
and kind of a Star Trek fan and so on. He said, I wonder if we could really have warp drive. And so he used Einstein's equations to say,